It was a crisp Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago when Malik Thompson, a seasoned Homeland Security agent, set out on his usual commute to the office. The city, waking up to a new day, was still a bit sleepy as he cruised through its quiet streets. Malik had always enjoyed this time of day when the bustling chaos of the city had not yet reached its peak. The silence offered a sense of calm, allowing him to mentally prepare for whatever the day might bring. His black BMW, a sleek model he had earned after years of hard work, hummed smoothly along the road, the engine a constant reminder of the fruits of his labor. As he drove, Malik's mind wasn't on the roads around him. Instead, he was engrossed in the latest case files on his phone. For nearly a decade, Malik had worked as an intelligence officer specializing in counterterrorism operations. His work was demanding, often stressful, and sometimes exhausting. The responsibility of safeguarding national security weighed heavily on his shoulders every day. Yet today, as he scrolled through documents, reviewing the fine details of his latest assignment, he felt a rare sense of calm. His mind was clear, and he could almost forget the usual anxiety that accompanied the job. His thoughts were broken only by the occasional glance at the road ahead. Without warning, the peace of his morning was shattered by the sudden flash of red and blue lights in his rearview mirror. A police siren blared to life, its sound cutting through the quiet hum of his car. Malik's grip on the steering wheel tightened instinctively, and he slowed down, immediately pulling over to the side of the road. The unexpected encounter felt like the start of a routine traffic stop, a scenario Malik had encountered countless times before in his years of driving. However, this time, something about the situation felt different. Officer Richards emerged from the patrol car and approached Malik's vehicle with a posture that was anything but casual. His body language was tense, and there was a certain stiffness to his movement that made Malik's stomach churn. The officer, his hand resting near his holster, scanned the interior of the car before speaking. "Good morning, sir. Can I see your license and registration?" His voice was professional but had an edge of authority that Malik couldn't ignore. Malik's mind raced. Had he been speeding? Was there something wrong with his car? He couldn't think of any reason why he would be pulled over. His driving record was clean, and he had always been careful to follow the rules of the road. With a deep breath, Malik handed over his documents. "Everything's in order, officer. I don't think there's any problem," he said, his voice steady and measured, though a quiet unease had begun to stir inside him. The officer, however, didn't immediately review the documents. Instead, he took them in hand and seemed to hesitate for a moment, his gaze flicking from the paperwork to Malik's face. The silence between them stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Then Officer Richards motioned toward Malik, his next words slicing through the air like a sharp blade. "Step out of the vehicle, please." Confusion flickered across Malik's face. He hesitated for a brief moment, trying to process what was happening. The officer's request didn't feel routine. It felt like an escalation. Malik's mind buzzed with questions. Why was he being asked to get out of the car? He hadn't been told he was being arrested, and he hadn't done anything wrong. But before he could voice his concerns, he realized that this was no ordinary traffic stop. "Is there a reason you're detaining me?" Malik asked, his frustration beginning to rise. His hands, which had been steady moments ago, were now slightly clenched, and his eyes scanned the area for any clues about what might be going on. The officer didn't answer him immediately. Instead, another police car pulled up behind them, and within moments, several more officers emerged from the vehicles. They stood in a loose but deliberate formation surrounding Malik's car. The growing sense of unease in Malik's chest began to manifest into something more tangible, fear. Something about the scene felt off. His gut told him that this wasn't just a simple traffic stop. But why? Malik couldn't put his finger on it. As he stood there, watching the officers gather around him, the air thick with tension, the question lingered. What was really happening here? The officer who had initially approached him finally spoke, though his words only added to the confusion. "We've had reports of a car matching this description involved in a series of robberies," he explained, though his gaze remained fixed on the ground, unwilling to meet Malik's eyes. Malik's jaw tightened and his breath caught in his throat. A cold realization washed over him and his pulse quickened. The officer's words confirmed what he had already suspected: racial profiling. They had assumed that because he was a black man driving a luxury car, he must be involved in some sort of criminal activity. It didn't matter that Malik had always followed the law, that he had worked tirelessly in one of the most demanding and prestigious agencies in the country. None of that mattered. The color of his skin and the car he drove were all that seemed to matter to the officers now. Trying to keep his composure, Malik forced himself to breathe steadily. His anger began to rise, but he knew that losing control in this situation would only make things worse. He wasn't some thug or criminal. He was a Homeland Security agent, a professional. He worked every day to protect the very system these officers served. Yet here he was, treated as though he was guilty until proven innocent. "I work for the Department of Homeland Security," he said, his voice firm and clear. "I have the proper credentials. I'm not the person you're looking for." Malik reached into his jacket to pull out his badge, but before he could, another officer, one with a visible air of agitation, stepped forward and grabbed his arm, his grip tight and demanding. "No sudden movements." The officer barked, his tone sharp and commanding. Malik froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The situation had escalated quickly, and his pulse was now racing. The fear that had been growing inside him began to take hold. It wasn't just about being detained, it was about the assumption that he was a criminal based solely on his appearance. His mind was a whirlwind of disbelief and anger. "I'm not trying to cause any trouble," Malik said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "I just want to get this cleared up." But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The officers weren't listening. They were too busy, too caught up in their own assumptions. It didn't matter who Malik was. To them, he was just another black man behind the wheel of a high-end car, and that alone was enough to raise suspicion. The tension in the air was so thick, it seemed almost tangible as Malik sat on the curb, his wrists resting lightly on his knees. The cold pavement seeped through his clothes, but he hardly noticed. His mind was consumed by frustration and disbelief. How had this happened? The officers were still rifling through his car, opening compartments, pulling out his personal belongings, and turning everything upside down as if they were searching for evidence of a crime they had already decided he committed. It was an act of humiliation, a blatant assumption that because of his race and the car he drove, he was a criminal. Malik had spent nearly a decade working for Homeland Security, a branch of the government where the stakes were high and the pressure was constant. He had trained with the best and had earned every single responsibility that came his way. Never had he been treated like this, not once. He had dealt with terrorists, smugglers, and hardened criminals, but none of that had prepared him for the bitter sting of racial profiling by law enforcement officers meant to protect the public. He had never imagined it would come to this, sitting on the sidewalk, a professional being treated like a common criminal, all because of the color of his skin. His thoughts were interrupted as Officer Richards approached him again. The officer's face was impassive, but there was something almost apologetic in his eyes, though Malik knew that apology wasn't meant for him. Richards seemed more uncomfortable with the situation than Malik had initially realized. "We're going to have to tow the car for further inspection," Richards said, his voice as stern as before. But something about the officer's delivery made it sound more like a command than an explanation. Malik could feel the fire inside him beginning to rise. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You're kidding, right?" he shot back, his voice rising. "I told you who I am. I work for Homeland Security. You can verify it. Why the hell are you still treating me like this?" The words spilled out before he could stop them, each one laced with anger and disbelief. "I've already given you my information. I've done nothing wrong." But Officer Richards wasn't listening. His eyes avoided Malik's, and he turned away, signaling to one of the other officers to prepare for the tow. The situation was spiraling, and Malik knew if he didn't take control, it could escalate further. His mind raced, desperately searching for a way to end this nightmare. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone and dialed his supervisor, Agent Rodriguez. "Malik, what's going on?" Rodriguez's voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. "We've been getting calls from the local police department about an officer-involved situation." Malik could barely contain the frustration in his voice as he explained the situation, not holding back any of the anger that had been simmering inside him. "They're treating me like a criminal, Rodriguez. They think I'm some thug driving a stolen car. They've got me sitting here on the curb while they search everything I own." He glanced up to see another officer going through his briefcase, pulling out sensitive work files that were meant to be private. "I can't believe this is happening," he added, his words tinged with disbelief. "I've told them who I am, but they don't care." Rodriguez's voice shifted, more serious now, a clear sign of concern. "I'm on my way, Malik. Stay where you are. Don't do anything that'll make the situation worse. I'll take care of this." Malik held his breath as he waited. Each minute felt like an hour, and the officers continued to comb through his belongings, seemingly oblivious to the reality of who he was. They acted as though they were just doing their job, but to Malik, it felt more like they were trying to break him, testing his patience, his resolve, his dignity. Within moments that felt like eternity, a black SUV pulled up and Agent Rodriguez emerged. The difference in demeanor was immediate. The officers recognized him right away, their stance shifting, no longer as confrontational as before. Malik stood up slowly, brushing dirt from his pants, his eyes never leaving Officer Richards, who had yet to acknowledge the situation fully. Rodriguez approached Officer Richards without hesitation, his badge visible and his authority unmistakable. The tension in the air was palpable as the two men exchanged words, the officer clearly uncomfortable but unable to avoid Rodriguez's commanding presence. The difference in how they were treated was striking. While the officers had surrounded Malik and treated him with suspicion, they now backed off at the mere sight of Rodriguez's badge. "Officer," Rodriguez began, his voice firm, "this is Agent Malik Thompson, a senior agent with Homeland Security. You can check his credentials, and you can verify with our department. This situation should never have gotten this far." For a moment, Officer Richards said nothing. He glanced back at Malik, then at his colleagues, and there was a palpable shift in the air. The officers, who had been so quick to surround and intimidate Malik, now took a step back, clearly uncertain about what had just transpired. Malik stood silently, his frustration building. He could feel the eyes of the other officers on him, but none of them were meeting his gaze. Rodriguez pulled out his phone and dialed the number for the department. The conversation that followed was brief but effective. As he spoke, the officers seemed to realize the gravity of their mistake, though none of them offered an apology. The truth was slowly coming to light, but Malik couldn't shake the humiliation that clung to him. His career, his integrity, had been questioned in a moment of ignorance. This wasn't just about one officer's misstep. It was a reflection of a systemic problem, a deeper issue that would take more than a simple apology to address. After what seemed like an eternity, Officer Richards returned to Malik, this time with his posture slightly less rigid. I'm sorry, sir. We didn't know," he muttered, his voice lacking the confidence it once had. Malik's cold gaze met Richards's eyes, and for a long moment there was silence between them. The apology, such as it was, felt hollow. Malik's jaw tightened as he stood up from the curb. "I don't want an apology," he said, his voice sharp. "I want accountability. This shouldn't have happened in the first place." Rodriguez placed a hand on Malik's shoulder, offering him a small but meaningful gesture of support. "We're filing a formal complaint, Malik. This isn't over," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. Malik nodded, but the sting of the experience lingered. As he watched the police cruiser drive away, the relief of the situation being resolved slowly settled in. His car, the symbol of his hard-earned success, was now cleared of any wrongdoing. But the experience had left a bitter taste. He knew that this was far from the last time he would face discrimination or bias in his line of work. The system, for all its checks and balances, was flawed. For Malik, this moment of humiliation became a catalyst. It wasn't just about the officer's mistake or their failure to see beyond the surface. It was about a deeper issue that demanded attention. The experience had shaken him, yes, but it also gave him a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just a Homeland Security agent anymore. He was a symbol of resilience, of strength in the face of ignorance. And he would not allow the world to forget it. Tomorrow, he would continue his work, knowing that his fight for justice, for equality, and for accountability would not end with this incident. His resolve had only grown stronger, and the next challenge, no matter how difficult, would find him standing tall and unyielding. If you found Malik's story thought-provoking and powerful, join us at Expect Stories for more gripping narratives that delve into real-world issues and untold experiences. Subscribe to our channel for insightful stories, hard-hitting truths, and thought-provoking discussions. Don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Stay tuned, because Expect Stories is here to bring you more stories that matter.